today on Mother Mayhem.
Healing doesn't give you your childhood back. It gives you your adulthood back. It gives you the ability to experience your life as it's happening instead of through the lens of what should have been. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the podcast for daughters of narcissistic and emotionally limited mothers. I'm your host, Heather Gray. And today, everyone, you are going to meet a daughter who is asking the core question. Why wasn't I worth it? Why wasn't I worth loving? Why wasn't I worth saving? Why didn't my mother want me? Why didn't she choose me? And then how do I ever heal from a wound that cuts this kind of deep? Today, we're cutting it into the core of the mother wound again, as we have in recent episodes, at one of the hardest parts to heal, and seeing what we can do together to bring all of you from the place of the really hard and intense feelings that lie in those questions closer to a place that you want to be. I've named you Rizzo from Greece. As I read your letter, honestly, I could practically hear there are worse things I could do playing in my head while I was reading along to your words. And admittedly, this name, I know, is not a perfect match. We know Rizzo was a mean girl, and I am by no means calling you out as a mean girl. However, Rizzo has one hell of a tough exterior. She calls things like she sees them. She acts like she doesn't care, but in fact, she cares a whole lot. And she's in this push-pull between wanting to be seen, but also wanting to maintain her protective exterior. And I think that's how you find yourself. And I think you might relate a little bit to Miss Rizzo. So now, let me read your story, and I'll find all of you on the other side. Hi, Heather. I've been a podcast listener for a few years, and it's always provided me with a sense of validation while navigating my own therapy and recovery and the abusive relationship I've had with my mom. You say it often, to share your story is a part of healing. Sharing's important. It's a big learning curve, blah, 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 blah. And I often catch myself rolling my eyes at you, knowing how right you are. But my story is a heavy one. And like every daughter out there, we don't want to be the burden we have been told that we are. Today, I was listening to you share on episode 110 and the messy middle, and I couldn't come up with any decent excuse not to write all of this out. So here we go. I grew up with a mom and dad who never really wanted to be together, but stayed married for 25 years. They're both deeply abused people themselves, and they didn't have or look for the tools to heal themselves. They became alcoholics, and we had a front row seat to how deeply you can hurt another person. I'm in the middle and the oldest daughter. My mom reminded all three of us that she never really wanted to have us, but she did the right thing, and we should be grateful. We all grew up in a house where you never knew who you were going to get at the end of a day, or if you would say or do something to set one of them off. I grew up to be the fixer in my house, and I'm really good at it. At some point, I don't recall when, I started to wonder if anyone was ever going to be there for me. And I started showing up for myself in ways that I wanted from others. It really helped me mature and accept things that I previously didn't fully understand. I started building an inner strength from her wrath that felt strong and capable. I moved out at 18 and really started working on myself, doing things for myself for probably the first time in my life. I figured out a path for myself far from the view of my highly critical, narcissistic, mentally unwell mother and fawning, dissociated father. For the majority of my mid-20s and 30s, I thought I had done the work, and I was way further into healing from her than I really was. I went to therapy, I read the books, I went to women's retreats, and I intellectualized all of it. It all made sense, and I found I was way more comfortable to sit with what happened to us as kids. But then I became a mom. and it cracked me open in a way that nothing could have prepared me for. I spent the better part of a decade just trying to do the opposite of what she did, terrified and constantly unsure of myself. I would remind myself of what I went through daily and course correct every single time, with immense resistance inside of myself for going against what I already knew. It had truly been gut-wrenching, exhausting, and the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life. It opened up wounds in me I had long scarred over and ignored. It's one of the parts of my motherhood that I hate about myself. I was trying so hard not to be her. I very rarely stopped to enjoy it. Looking back now that my girls are older, I miss them in a way like I long for an experience I didn't have. Eerily similar longing that I have for the mother I didn't have. So in some ways, I feel like the little girl who was robbed of the experiences she deserved again. So as I turn into the parent I wanted, craved, and deserved as a kid, I understand my mother and what happened to myself and my siblings less every day. I feel more hurt, angrier, and disgusted more than I did in my 20s. Today, I do not have a relationship with my mom. I went no contact after the final straw with her was when she criticized my parenting during my hardest season in parenting I had ever had. We haven't spoken in 2 years. She hasn't directly reached out and likely never will. She's been sending everything that reminds her of my existence back to me. God, awful. She's returned grad pictures, family pictures, cutting herself out of them, handmade Christmas decorations, pictures my girls have drawn for her, and birthday cards I've sent with word corrections to remind me of how horrible I am. All the while, my phone number is still the same, has been for 20 years, and her number isn't blocked. My wise brain knows that this is her way of trying to stay in my life and also to make me responsible for the pain I've caused her. But it always leaves me with the hardest question to answer, but also one that haunts me, and I just want to know how to move on from it. Why? Why can't she be different? Am I not worth it? How come I can do it all so differently and she won't even try? As I actively parent with intention, compassion, empathy, and respect, I am reminded every day what I didn't get as a kid. I deserve better, and now I am left to navigate being a mom without having a mother myself. And the grief, the anger, and the pain I feel every day is a constant reminder that I am still healing, and I might be for the rest of my life. So I'm wondering, when all the work is done, how is that going to feel? What's going to feel different? Will I be healed? Or is it just some magical term like balance? It's nice to think about, nice to aim yourself towards, to kill yourself to achieve, but ultimately accept it's not really true. You broke me up a little bit on that one there, Miss Rizzo. I hear so much hurt and fear in your letter, and no, I don't think you have to kill yourself to be healed, but that sure is a pretty perfect way to describe what healing can sometimes feel like. I've often said to daughters that healing can feel like breaking your own heart, but I think you're actually getting to the real crux of it here in your letter. Healing can feel like you're breaking your back and doing yourself in for some seemingly small crumbs of healing when the boulder-sized hurt is still sitting on your chest and it makes you catch your breath. And of course, y'all know this part too. It is fucking heavy to be dragging around with you while you're trying to live your life better than your parents did without any example of how exactly you're supposed to be doing that. Your irritation, your impatience, your skepticism. I quite like all of those things a little bit there, Rizzo. All of them make sense to me. I hear your longing and I hear your protectiveness, and I promise you there is room for you and all of your parts inside of Mayhem. I believe you, Rizzo. Mayhem believes you. I believe all of the pain you didn't even specify that comes with living in your home as a kid. And I believe you are doing your very, very best to write a different ending for yourself and for your kids. This buck is clearly going to be stopping with you, sister. You are going to be breaking this generational curse, but I get it. You don't want to have to die trying. I want to try something new here as I respond to your letter, because I know you've done a lot of work already. So you know how to name trauma. You know how it's impacted you. You've likely already been introduced to how it impacts your ability to connect with yourself and other people. There's a lot you already know, right? And again, air quotes here, you know it. And there's also a lot you've done. You got out. You've gone no contact. You've worked hard to be intentional as a parent. You've learned all these things. You're doing all of these things. And yet every day you are reminded that it doesn't feel like enough because all of it still really hurts. So today isn't about talking about trauma brain, wise mind, or nervous system regulation. You know so much about all of that already. Now you're asking the questions that don't have the clear black and white answers. Why don't I feel better? Will I ever feel better? Is it possible to feel better? And what the heck does better even look like when you're surviving a life like yours? And I want to name clearly what you already so powerfully did. Will I ever get over not having been chosen? So I want to tell you what I see, not just in your story, but in all of the pain that lies in the underbelly of it, because I think this is where you are most hurting right now. Rizzo, you didn't just survive a hard childhood. You grew up in a house built on abuse. It wasn't decorated by it. It wasn't just touched by it. The foundation of your house was constructed from abuse. I see that. I know that. And I believe you. Your parents were two people literally drowning their own pain with alcohol while they named you and your sisters the accidents, told you that you were unwanted, and then implied you should be grateful to them for existing because they did the right thing. That is awful. It is awful. And of course, you live in a world of hurt about that. Of course you do. This kind of experience doesn't even just hit your heart. It's the kind that seeps into your bones. And as a result, you were taught things that you were never meant to learn. Now, sitting with your story too, Rizzo, I started to think about how safety, or even the idea of it, must feel like to someone who's lived your life. And I started to imagine that it's probably really hard for you to trust quiet, for you to trust calm, that calm is just something that happens before a storm, because for you, calm is what happens before a sucker punch. Your body's probably so used to scanning for what's going to ruin your day, a moment, a memory, because in your world, ruining was the one thing that you could predict. You could predict something coming in one fell swoop and wrecking anything you might have built for yourself. And I hear really clearly too, Rizzo, you are a doer. You're an overcomer. You're probably an overachiever. I imagine you live in this constant state of ready. You're ready to fix. You're ready to manage. You're ready to hold it all together. Because for so long, being prepared was more necessary than being present. But then you learned the value of presence. And you didn't want to let go of being prepared. So now you ended up living in this dance of trying to do both. You found yourself scrambling, aware and tired, but still trying. And then every time you realize that your childhood is what makes all of this so freaking hard, of course you end up getting pissed, but you don't want to live pissed, so you go back to being present, all the while still being just a little bit pissed. And this makes so much sense to me. And especially if you tend to fall in this category of daughters who relate to yourselves through your competence, through what you can do. Because I imagine your competence and what you're capable of and what you're able to do has very much become your armor. You became the fixer because being useful felt safer than being lovable. And then when things fell apart, you could come alive. And as strange as that might sound to hear, I hear that falling apart page, that falling apart phase, that chaos phase can become your comfort zone, because chaos is something you've been able to understand, navigate, and work your way through. You're great when the kitchen is on fire, but if someone tries to make you tea, you probably get itchy. And maybe even as I say that, you're wondering what the hell I'm even talking about. Because tea, when has anyone ever thought to make you tea? Exactly. That right there is the point. Maybe no one's ever thought to make you tea. Maybe everyone around you has gotten so used to your steadiness, your competence, your ability to tend to their thirst that they have stopped even imagining you might have one of your own. So stillness is never really showing up for you, right? And it's not because you can't accept care, but because it ends up being something that isn't offered that often. And then when it is, it probably feels so confusing and unfamiliar because accepting care might end up feeling super vulnerable for you. And it makes turning care down start to feel like the strong thing to do. It would make sense to me if those two things have been turned a little inside out for you a time or two. And of course, underneath all of this, we're going to find exhaustion. You are so used to being the one who tends to things that you don't even notice how thirsty you are until your throat is scratchy and your tongue is sticking to the roof of your mouth. And Rizzo, I think right here is where you started to experience what's pretty common for a lot of daughters. You started confusing being numb with being strong. And I imagine crying, that probably felt useless. Tears, what the heck would they ever do for you? Tears can't fix anything. However, anger, well now. Anger does serve a purpose. We've talked about it on the show so many times. Anger has fueled your resolve. It's strengthened your armor. Your anger, I bet it's what kept you upright in your house, because falling apart would have only served to make you the target. And this is why the whole feelings thing gets so messy for you. Rizzo, you make so much sense to me, because here's what I think happens. When big feelings rise up, you try to outrun them or outpace them. You get productive, you handle it. And from the outside, everyone sees your capability while you feel like you're crumbling. And I know you feel these moments where it all feels like it's crumbling, or it could all crumble around you. But Rizzo, I don't actually think that that's what's happening for you. I think that what's happening is that your competence has been your shield. But right now, your competence is doing double duty. Sure, it's keeping you feeling and seemingly strong, but also it's serving a bit as your protection. And right here, Rizzo, is where I would usually start talking to daughters about how love and connection land. and what attachment feels like for them right now, how they experience being close, and what safety inside of a relationship actually looks like. You didn't share much of that part of yourself in your letter, so I just want to say it wouldn't surprise me if love has always felt a little bit confusing and painful for you. Closeness might sometimes feel like pressure. Many daughters in your place tell me that they crave being seen, but also feel an urge to pull back the moment that someone actually tries to see them. And Rizzo, in our email exchange, we've talked about the battle of feeling too much, right? We've talked about your worries that your feelings, your insights, your growth might overwhelm the people around you. And maybe you even feel the opposite sometimes, like you're the one pulling everyone else along on their respective healing journeys. And I say this because it's easy when you've lived your life surviving dysfunction to mistake that kind of emotional labor for love, to think that connection means caretaking. But true connection, the kind that nourishes instead of drains you, well, it asks you to be seen without that kind of performance, without that kind of doing. And that's a new kind of safety that a lot of daughters find themselves starting from scratch, learning how to build. And let's just I'm coming at you hard and fast here. So I'm going to take a deep breath and encourage everyone to take one with me. I'm coming in hot on this, and we're going to be talking about the most tender part of all of this for you, motherhood, because it has cracked you wide the fuck open, right? It has you seeing all of these things and feeling all of these things, and it has driven you to heal so many parts of you. It's powered you to get better, but it has also forced you to look at your deepest hurts dead on. And sometimes you're doing that on a daily basis. And I felt that landed in my chest when you described it in that way. So many daughters write into the show talking about this exact thing, how they didn't know how hurt they were growing up until they become mothers themselves. And of course that makes sense to me, but it still leaves you with all of that stuff to unpack. And I hear how fed up to hear you are with all of the boxes, all of the things that you need to unpack. Of course you are. I really do get you not wanting motherhood to be your rear view mirror for all the places you've been in years past. But also, let's just keep it real here together. Motherhood changed the map for you. Loving your kids in ways that you were never loved presses on every single bruise you carry. And we know this thing about bruises, right? They don't heal when they're pressed. They just end up hurting. And I feel this loss, how you caught yourself getting so busy, doing all the things, fixing all the things, managing all the things that you weren't fully in it. And that makes a lot of sense to me. You were trying to give your kids the stability you never had while also trying to build it inside of yourself. And that is always going to be a really difficult thing to do, if not an impossible thing to do perfectly. But here is something I don't believe, that it is as bad as your regret tells you it is. Because I think you might be comparing yourself to an idea. To mothers who never had to unlearn what you had to unlearn, to mothers who didn't have to fight their own nervous systems just to stay regulated inside of a tantrum, or the kinds of mothers who never had to relearn what safety feels like before they were able to offer it to someone else. And here's something I really need you to remember, Rizzo. Even women with perfect childhoods question themselves as mothers. No mother really knows what the heck they're doing when faced with the enormity of raising a human being. Everyone's just improvising and winging it and hoping that their love shows through the cracks. So if you're living with guilt or remorse for the moments you missed, the times you were distracted, the days you were surviving instead of savoring, let's not sugarcoat it here. Many daughters who become moms carry real, honest grief about how their trauma has touched their children. That is true. It's a really hard reality of some of this work. But so is this. Your kids never need a perfect mother. They need a real one. They need a mother who can love them, who can say she loves them, and who can take ownership when she gets it wrong. So if there's actually any real repair work to do, trust yourself to do it. You already know how. You can repair it with them, and you can repair it with yourself too, by forgiving yourself and allowing yourself some grace and self-compassion. And if this guilt, which honestly sounds like it has, if it's just becoming a form of self-punishment for you, another way to keep proving to yourself that you're not enough, maybe it's time to put it down. Presence, my friend, doesn't have an expiration date. You still have time. If you feel like you lost moments that you can't get back, maybe think about how you can create something for yourself, a healing ritual, a letter, or a small symbolic act, something that can let you honor what you think was lost and release the shame that keeps you to it. But the truth is here, healing isn't ever going to be defined by getting every single moment right. And now, if it's all right with you, I'd like to get into what it's been like for you since going no contact, because I think what's been happening in that neck of the woods is actually a big part of why healing is feeling so impossibly hard for you right now. It is really hard to heal when the hurt keeps happening, right? You've done the work, you've stepped away, you said no more, but then she finds a way to keep showing up, not through conversation or direct contact, but passively through the mail. And there hasn't been much passive about it, because let's talk about what those envelopes have actually done to your heart. Those packages haven't been neutral. They're not just getting rid of clutter or housekeeping. They're messages, and there's absolutely nothing subtle or passive about them. They are as direct as being told, I didn't want you and I did you a favor by keeping you. Every single photo she's returned to you is her doing that over and over again. It's that rejection. It's that re-traumatization. So, of course, all of that gets you incredibly wound up. Of course it does. Rizzo, oh my God, you make so much sense to me. Your story makes so much sense to me, because each envelope is this not so quiet reminder of that original wound. You deal with it, you carry it, and every time you open one, it pulls you right back into that core wound of the oldest question. Why wasn't I worth it? And the thing is, I know you don't even consciously believe the answer is I wasn't. I can tell just from your letter that you're too self-aware for that. You know the truth in your mind, that her behavior is about her limitations, her damage, her refusal to take responsibility. But your body doesn't know yet. So every single package, every envelope ends up reactivating the grief that you're trying so hard to process. It isn't that you haven't healed. It's that your healing it just keeps literally getting reopened. That's what's making no contact feel so brutal for you right now. It's not silence that's hurting you. It's that silence rarely equals stillness or peace. And Rizzo, I know from the exchanges you and I have had back and forth a couple of times now that you're a little bit allergic to bullshit. And I also know that you're holding questions that every daughter eventually gets to. When will all the work be done? How will that feel? What will feel different? Will I ever be healed? And I want to honor the questions for what they actually are. They're not about curiosity. They are about fatigue. They're about the point in the journey where you've done everything you know how to do. The therapy, the books, the boundaries, the somatic work. And still you're looking around your life thinking, why does it still hurt? You're reaching the part of healing that isn't about fixing or doing something anymore. You're at the point where you now have to live with what's been lost, and you have to do that without letting it define you. Healing doesn't give you your childhood back. It gives you your adulthood back. It gives you the ability to experience your life as it's happening instead of through the lens of what should have been. And when you say, I might be healing for the rest of your life, well, sister, I have to say, yes, you probably will be. But not in that white knuckle, endlessly working on yourself kind of way that you're probably imagining. More in the way that we all keep growing new layers of self-awareness, self-trust, and compassion as we live and move through the world. Healing doesn't end. It does that thing I was talking about at the beginning. It integrates. It becomes a part of who you are. The way a scar becomes part of your skin. It doesn't go away. It just stops being the thing that you lead with. You asked me why your mom couldn't pivot the way you did, why she couldn't see what she was doing and chose differently. After all, that's what you did, right? And one of the deepest griefs a daughter is going to carry. You looked at your own patterns, you felt the discomfort, and you changed. She opted to look away. And that isn't because you were unworthy of her doing that work. It's because she was unwilling to face herself. I would also argue wholly, largely, completely incapable. It's devastating, honestly, to realize that the love you wanted required her to become someone she refused to be or even incapable of being. And what you're left with isn't ever just going to be grief for the mom you didn't have. It's also grief for the version of you that kept waiting for her. So when you ask me, what will it feel like when I am fully healed? Well, I think the answer here is it's going to feel way less like an arrival, way less like a plane landing, and more like forward movement that starts to happen with more ease. And yeah, you're still going to have moments when it stings. My mom died when I was 5 years old, and I only have 3 memories of her, maybe more. Sometimes I can't tell what I remember versus what's been told to me, but it still stings when I think about it. And that doesn't mean I haven't healed from the loss. And Rizzo, I promise you that you are also going to have moments where you notice that it stings less. So when you ask me, what will it feel like when I'm healed? I don't think it's going to feel like fireworks or a finish line. It's going to feel like ordinary days that don't knock you over. It's going to feel like realizing you haven't thought about your mother for a week. And not because you're avoiding her, but because she isn't the center of your mental universe anymore. Healing tends to look like catching yourself mid-spiral and stepping out of it before you lose your whole day to it. It's when your kid slams a door and instead of going into a self-deprecating spiral of blame and thinking it's all your fault and there's some parenting book out there that you missed, you end up finding yourself taking a breath and staying present in the moment. It's when you set a boundary and you don't need to write a 3-paragraph text explaining why. Oh, Rizzo, ask me how I know about that one. It's when you have a good moment, a real one, and you let yourself enjoy it without connecting it to any kind of loss. That's what it looks like when the work starts working. It's not shiny, it's not perfect, but it's calmer. And for many of you daughters, honestly, it's going to feel boring. Healing's when you start living your life instead of managing your history, because healing doesn't mean the story stops hurting. It means the hurt stops running the story. Rizzo, what I want you to hear and what I want every daughter listening to hear is that healing isn't something you finish. It's something you find yourself practicing. You don't wake up one morning free of it all. You wake up one morning and you realize you handled something differently. You felt the sting, you didn't spiral. You told the truth, and P.S., you did not apologize for it. That is healing. And I know the temptation is to measure progress by how much pain is left. But I gotta be honest with all of you, that is not the right metric. You can't measure healing by the absence of pain. You measure it by the presence of peace. The truth is here, daughters, you didn't get to choose your mom's story. You're choosing your stories. Every single time you parent differently, every time you refuse to pass on anything that was handed to you, and it's hard and it's lonely, and on some days and on most days, it feels really unfair, but you're the ones doing it. You're doing it anyway. And that is the real work, learning to live a life that's yours and a life that actually feels like yours. And oh my goodness, Rizzo, I'm so glad you wrote in. I'm so glad that you shared your story and your questions. I know there are a whole lot of women out there listening right now saying, yes, me too, same sister. Thank you so much for saying it, because I too am as exhausted as fuck and tired as fuck and wondering when any of this is going to actually be over. And here's what I want you to know before we wrap up here, Rizzo. I hold so much hope for you. I hold so much hope. This, my friend, is not where your story is going to end. You are a member of this community of women from around the world who are in this with you. And I, for sure, most definitely am in it with you too. Bye for now. If you felt seen in this episode, I want you to know the work doesn't end here. What we're talking about on the podcast, relational trauma, mother wounds, identity, and healing, was never meant to be worked through alone. That's why I've built an entire ecosystem of support around Mother Mayhem, and you can now find all of it over at mayhemdaughters.com. You'll learn more about our weekly support groups, which meet Tuesdays at noon and Thursdays at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. These aren't trauma dumps, they're spaces for real connection, mutual support, and movement making. You'll also find our private online community, Mayhem Daughters, where the conversation continues between episodes. It's not social media. It's something safer, deeper, and intentionally designed to support your healing. And if you're not quite ready to share in a group but want my eyes on your story, I offer one-on-one Mayhem consultations as well. You can learn more about all of it over at mayhemdaughters.com. If this show has helped you and you want to help keep it ad-free, you can do that through the sponsor link on the website. But I also want to be clear. If you're already a member of group in the community or you've worked with me one-on-one, you are already supporting the show. There's nothing more I'm asking of you. If you have a story or reflection of your own, I'd love to hear it. You can send a message or a voice note of 10 minutes or less to heather@mayhemdaughters.com. There's no mayhem without your stories or your questions. And if you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares make a real difference, and I hope you'll consider doing so. And lastly, a heartfelt thank you to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's been in it with me since 2016 and somehow always knows what I meant to say, even when I don't quite say it right. This isn't just a show, it's a community, and you're already a part of it. I'm so glad to have you in it with me.